Welcome back, Spokane Talks Live, and we have from McNeice Wheeler, Robin Haynes. Yes. Robin, how are you?
I'm great.
All right, we're going to push this mic toward you just a little bit because
no one ever tells me I'm too quiet.
Well, I wasn't going to tell you that. You sent me several things to pick from.
I did, yeah.
In terms of topics, and what did I pick?
How to fire your employees.
Okay, all right. Yeah, my producer said in my ear, is there something I should know?
Right. Surprise!
Yeah. I brought in an attorney. I love
won't
it.
Be awkward at all.
No, not at all. And I picked that because if you look at in government recently in the area, between the Valley City and the police chief in downtown Spokane in the city, and we all start going, well, I thought we were an at-will state and everything else, and so I thought we've seen so much in the headlines that maybe this is a topic that also applies to those of us in business as well, right?
Absolutely.
So walk us through what is the ground like these days to walk on?
Of course. So Washington is an at-will work state. Almost every state is.
Okay.
Meaning that for the most part you just don't have a contract to work.
But you could have a contract.
You could.
Okay.
But the baseline is no contract, meaning you can be terminated at any time.
For anything?
For anything other than illegal discrimination.
Right.
So I don't like the way your hair is parted today. Sorry. Which, I worry about constantly. But, people like government employees, city employees, firefighters, police officers, they're usually members of unions.
Right.
So if you're a union employee of any
That's
variety,
already covered.
You may or may not be an at-will employee. It's going to be covered by your collective bargaining agreement.
Right, that's what I mean. Right. It's covered by the agreement.
And then you would go through that process.
Right.
If you're the employer terminating someone or the employee thinks you've been wrongfully terminated.
Right.
I will say, as someone who practices both with employers and employees, everyone calls and believes they have been wrongfully terminated. Odds are good you haven't in the state of Washington or any other at-will work state for that matter. Occasionally, people do have contracts for short-term work, limited scope work, construction type independent contractor work. We think about that a lot.
Sure.
Teachers usually are on kind of a school year contract.
Right.
So that will govern, the terms of that agreement will govern how you can and can't terminate someone.
Right.
Other than the at-will work piece, though, most companies, businesses have an employee handbook, and if you don't, you need one.
Yes.
Particularly with some of the topics we talked about before with like Spokane Safe and sick leave and some of the other things that we've
discussed. You better spell it out.
Overtime, pay changes, all the bright and pleasant things I always talk about
here.
Yeah,
it's such bright and shiny news you bring.
It doesn't have to be something complicated, but a lot of times that's where employers get tripped up.
Yes.
Particularly when it comes to employee discipline. They may outline a list of, here are things we can terminate you for cause. Theft, showing up to work late too many times, those kinds of things.
What about pot use? Because you're dealing with, it's legal.
What about marijuana?
Yeah, it's legal in the state, not federal.
Yep.
And I've heard, and I think maybe you even said that a lot of companies are still testing.
Yes. So as long as you have an existing drug policy and you adhere to that policy and marijuana is part of that policy, then yes, you can terminate for that.
Okay.
And again, it's about what's in your handbook and following it. Same with alcohol. I mean, we think about things like it's legal to purchase alcohol, but you can't drive a FedEx truck if you're drunk, for example.
That probably would not be good.
So that's part
or
of
Uber,
their, that's part of their testing piece.
Sure.
But one thing I see employers get tripped up a lot is where they require progressive discipline to fire someone.
Okay.
Meaning 3 strikes you're out, right? Unless you do something egregious.
And they go right to strike 3.
Yeah, with something minor, like being late for work, and they just fire you, and there's nothing in the employee handbook or manual that says that we followed these procedures, and there's no write-up in the employee's personnel file.
So we need to document it.
Yeah, so if you require progressive discipline, which I think is generally unnecessary, particularly in an at-will work state when you have so much flexibility as an employer, but if you want it, it's your policy, follow it.
Okay.
Put it in writing, put it in the personnel file, have a discussion with the employee about it. So they know this is my first strike and I better be on the up and up. And not go through the other steps.
But you say we need a personnel
file,
a file, but also a handbook. But then I heard in my mind, if I have a handbook and don't follow it, I might be in more trouble.
You might.
So maybe I shouldn't have a handbook.
It's better to have policies that you're reinforcing and working through. It's actually really good for even a small company, for management to be looking at that as things change a little bit, the nature of your company changes.
Sure.
Having no policy leads to inconsistencies, and that's where it's easy to come in and say,
well, for her, you didn't do it, and for him, you did.
And so if we did it for him and not her, is this sexual harassment discrimination, for example? Or are we getting rid of a pregnant woman, which would also be illegal discrimination? So again, the wrongful termination comes in place when someone gets fired for the reason of being part of a protected class is the term.
Right.
And Washington is very broad, much broader than the federal system. Yeah. So it's everything from the things we think about age, over 40. So I'm not quite old enough yet to be discriminated against by my age, soon.
Well, but I'm way over.
That's right. So we can.
Thanks for
welcome.
Agreeing to that so quickly.
Barely.
Yeah, right.
You admitted it.
It's too late.
So age over 40. Gender.
Okay.
Gender identity in Washington is something. Transgender, that's been protected for a long time in Washington.
Okay.
Pregnancy is considered a short-term disability.
Isn't that discriminating because only you women can claim that?
Parental leave, if you're taking paternity leave, that would be a reason to wrongfully terminate someone. Veteran status or military status, we see employers,
especially if they're on National Guard and things like that.
We see employers violate a statute called USERRA, USERRA, a lot when someone has to go on leave or they get called up and then they get terminated.
Oh, yeah.
And you cannot do that. That also covers housing and things like that.
Sure.
So religious accommodations, you can't terminate someone because their religion is different than yours.
Okay. But what if they have a religion and they can't work weekends, for instance, and you really require that? That's part of the job.
That's right. So those are accommodations. If you're only open on the weekends and I can't work weekends, it's not reasonable for you to accommodate me and make me work a schedule
so I
that
shouldn't
no one else
hire
has.
You, to start with, probably.
Absolutely.
To be fair.
And, letting people know up front. But if you have shifts all week long and I can't work Saturday because I'm an Adventist, maybe.
Right.
But you could schedule me any other day of the week, it's probably discrimination not to.
Okay.
So terminating people for those kinds of things. And the other piece we see people wrongfully terminated for is what we call retaliation.
Okay.
So if I report someone else's wrongdoing and you fire me for reporting something I see that's wrong, that's wrongful termination as well. Yeah. That really comes into play with things. We see it with government contractors a lot. We saw a lot of it in Hanford.
Okay.
A lot of litigation there.
Good point. Yes, that would make sense.
Related to people whistleblowing about violations that weren't being reported to
and
the EPA.
And aren't we protected today with the whistleblowing pretty much?
Absolutely. Yeah, and so that applies both to actual employees and government contractors as well, so not just government employees. And so those kinds of pieces protect you, but people still get fired for those kinds of things.
Wow. Okay. Bottom line is, Robin, hire an attorney.
Hire an attorney.
I mean, do you help with like a handbook and things like that?
Okay. Absolutely help with a handbook. A lot of attorneys, I've done some of these things in the past. We'll do trainings for groups of employers to kind of give some tips and tricks as to how to do it. Sometimes it's just good to.
I think most people want to be fair.
Yes.
But they're not up to date on all the intricacies that are involved today. Mm-hmm. And my guess is you work hard to keep on top of that.
I have to, absolutely.
The rest of us are trying to run a business or whatever and can get tripped up on those.
Yes, and so better to spend a little time up front or even to have the conversation with a lawyer about how do I have that tough conversation to fire someone? Because generally, we have so many small businesses here. We work close together. We're a small community.
Right.
We want to keep those relationships positive.
Right.
And so just having that discussion about how do I get rid of this producer over here?
I know. So right after you're on here, you're going to go in and fire him for me, right?
I have been hired a couple of times to do the actual firing.
Oh, Lord. Yeah.
And I've warned employers that I can't always be the one that shows up because then every time the lawyer shows up, people panic.
Someone,
packing their bags.
And if you show up with an empty box, that's even worse.
Right, exactly.
Okay? A friend of mine down at KHQ says every time he shows up with an empty box, everybody goes running in the newsroom.
Right.
But anyway, Robin, this is actually exciting and something to learn.
Yeah.
And I think we all need to be on top of it. How can people get in touch with you?
McNeiceWheeler.com, McNeice Wheeler.com. Our phone number is 509-928-4141.
Okay.
I pretty much live there on weekends.
Yeah. So much for your life, right?
It's boring.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as we all have done, growing a business and climbing the ladder, we put in those extra hours. And so thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And I loved your email yesterday when you said you're going to be all fired up for firing today.
I am.
Yeah, you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. We'll be right back after this.
For the